Thanks for joining us at Right On Replicas, where we're proud to bring you the best scale model kit reviews on the planet. This review covers the Tom the Mongoose McEwen's 1957 Chevy funny car. It's a 1/24 scale Revell model kit, number 85-4305. Now, back in the day, he got his name, the Mongoose, as a snake killer, just like the real Mongoose do, because he was always rivaling that of Don the Snake Prudhomme on the drag racing circuit. Eventually, they formed an alliance and made a lot of money challenging each other on the drag strip. Now, this replica was raced by Tom back in 1988, and the new dragster had the body of the 57 and a modern funny car chassis. Tom McEwen won a lot of races, and he thrilled a lot of audiences in his funny cars and dragsters. Now, the kit is considered a skill level 2 for the intermediate builder, and there's 84 pieces molded in white, chrome, black vinyl tires, and water slide decals. The instructions are well laid out, and when you're done, the dimensions are about 9 1/4 inches long, 2 3/4 inches wide, and 2 1/4 inches high, unless it's on the prop rod, when it's about 3 1/4 inches. Here are the contents of the kit. It's a pretty basic kit. Most of the skill level here will be in putting the fragile frames together and the painting the car along with the decaling. But as you can see, the decals are very colorful. Some of them are larger though, and may require some aftermarket setting solution to properly conform to the body. Please remember to use the manufacturer's safety and use guidelines when using any of the products that you see or hear mentioned in the review. And we'll be using liquid cement for the most part, sometimes super glue for fragile parts, and white glue for glass. Construction starts with the motor, so grab these pieces from the kit and some liquid cement and assemble them as you see here. With the engine halves glued together, put the cylinder heads in place on top there, and then paint that aluminum color. Now, there's a detail on the transmission that's painted a little gunmetal color also. Now, the right rocker cover has some detail that gets painted semi-gloss black, and then the oil pan, left and right rocker covers are installed onto the engine assembly. Paint the intake manifold and both exhaust header flanges aluminum, and then the lower body is glued to the intake manifold, and the blower front and blower rear sections are attached to the blower body. The throttle butterflies are painted gloss red, and the blower scoop is then installed onto the lower body. The intake manifold assembly is glued to the engine assembly, and then the blower belt is painted flat black and aluminum. Now, the blower belt is installed to the blower's front and the engine assembly, and then the exhaust header flanges are attached to the cylinder heads. Next, the exhaust headers are glued to the exhaust header flanges. Although the exhaust headers are chromed, they don't normally appear that way in real life. So to figure out what color they were, I used a test of different kinds of paint. The graphite metallic is on top here, and the aluminum in the center, and some gunmetal on the bottom, and I determined that the closest color was the Model Master graphite metallic. The blower body, the front and the rear, and the left and right exhaust headers were painted with the graphite metallic. Rather, the pieces that you see here, and for the frame and the rear axle, front and back, and the roll cage support and the rear axle's top and bottom supports are painted semi-gloss black and assembled. And then the drive shaft is painted gunmetal. The rear axle top support gets glued to the roll cage support, and then the roll cage support assembly is glued to the frame. Now, the rear axle front is attached to the rear axle back, followed by the drive shaft being glued into the rear axle front. The rear axle assembly then is installed into the frame assembly, and the coolant tank top is glued to the bottom, and then the whole assembly installed into the frame. Next, the rear axle bottom support is attached to the frame and the rear axle assembly. At this point, your roll cage support assembly should look like this in the frame, and then the instructions aren't real clear on placement, so use this as a guide. There was a little side flash on the roll cage, and it's easily trimmed with a hobby knife. You can use a sand stick to smooth it out even further. The seat is painted aluminum and Model Master's flat black for brackets before it is installed into the frame assembly. And then the drive shaft will go through a hole on the seat by the driver's feet to attach to the transmission. The gas pedal is painted aluminum and has detailing that is painted flat black as well. Now the gas pedal is installed into the frame assembly. Paint the roll cage semi-gloss black before you install it into the frame assembly. And the brake lever is then glued in, and the fire extinguishers are painted red with some aluminum fittings before they are attached to the frame also. The fuel tank top is glued to the bottom, and then the assembly is installed into the frame. The dual oil filters are painted white and gunmetal. The dual oil filters are attached to the frame, and the front axles are glued into place on the frame as well. Now the right and left side panels are glued to the frame, and the engine is installed into the frame assembly on this positioning post. Now remember, you must scrape off paint or chrome before you glue parts together for a good bond. Grab these parts from the kit and paint the fuel line aluminum. It has some fittings that are flat black and some gunmetal as well. After it's dry, the fuel line gets attached to the engine assembly in the fuel tank, and then the left and right hose are painted flat black, and the left hose is attached to the left rocker cover and the frame, and then the right hose is attached to the right one. Now the tie rod gets inserted through the frame assembly and attached to both of the front axles, and the steering link is glued into place to the front left axle and the left side panel. Now the bell housing shield can be attached to the bell housing of the transmission and the frame assembly. Next, the shift linkage is glued into the transmission and the seat. So get these pieces out, and the electronics box is attached to the support and painted graphite metallic, and the instructions call for this part to be painted red. The box art shows the part being graphite metallic as well. The electronics box support is glued to the frame, and the instrument panel is painted with some semi-gloss black and silver. The steering gear box then is attached to the instrument panel, and the steering column is installed into the gearbox. Now the steering wheel gets painted semi-gloss black and attached to the steering column. The instrument panel assembly is then glued into the frame assembly. The wheelie bars have some detail on it that's painted flat black, the wheels for example, and the wheelie bars are then glued to the frame assembly. And then the wheelie bar's cross member gets glued between the right and left wheelie bars, and the front inner wheel is inserted into the front tire, and then the outer wheel is inserted into the front tire on the other side and glued together. Now the rear tires will be discussed next. In order to add a little authenticism to your kit, it's a good idea to make the tread on these great big dragster slicks look like they're a little bit used. And you can do that by pressing and rolling them on a piece of 220 sandpaper on a flat surface, or you can make a little jig like this that has some tapered washers and can be used to put the wheels into a squeeze play, and then in a drill you can turn them rapidly and make them and shape them so that they look very realistic. Paint the inner wheels red, and then the drag slick inserts are installed into the drag slicks, and then the assemblies are sanded to give them a realistic look. The inner wheels then are glued into the assemblies, and the rear outer wheel is inserted into the drag slicks and glued to the inner wheels. Install the front tires in the same method, and also add the rear tires into position on the spindles and the frame assembly. And then here's what it will look like after you complete step 10 of the instructions. This also includes, of course, the wheelie bars in back. After a couple light coats of primer, I painted the body a Testors gloss red, and then brush painted some Testors aluminum on the inside and to some of the interior portions. The bumper cushions were painted flat black, and the rear bumper and cockpit shroud are painted aluminum as well. The parachutes are gunmetal, and they're staged to dry and get ready for assembly. Remember to remove the chrome from any areas you're going to glue, and then the bumper cushions and the rear bumper are glued to the body. The parachutes are glued to the rear bumper. The windshield and the side windows are glued into the body with some clear part cement or white glue, and the hood ornaments are glued to the hood of the body. Now the cockpit shroud is added to the interior, and then the body can be installed onto the frame assembly by locating its gluing points and using some good strong glue. I suggest you use some epoxy there. Now it's time to add the decals to the body, but first you're going to want to paint the rear spoiler a semi-gloss black. And once that's dried, you can add the decals to that as well, and then go ahead and work on the body from one side to the other and from front to back to make sure that you get them all applied in the proper order and position. You can use the box art and the callouts in the instruction sheets, but after all, this is a really great looking model, and once you get the decals on there, it'll shine. Oh, there you have it. This great looking kit combines the mystique of the '57 Chevy with the speed of a funny car, and it's a real head turner. Now, if I were you, even though they're not readily available in the stores, you can still find them at online auctions. I'd go out and buy one and put it on my shelf. We hope you like this premium step-by-step model kit review, and so that you don't miss any more, please subscribe to our YouTube channel. But you can find us on Facebook and our website right on replicas.com. Thanks!